Hello, and thank you for watching. My name is Bradford Roberts, Principal Broker, Founder, and Owner of TR Realty in the Las Vegas area. After watching this video, please be sure to like it as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel. Download the pertinent handouts for this video by clicking the link in the comments below. Now let's get started. This video is entitled Class 3 Buyer Excellence, and this segment is entitled Buyer Brokerage. Buyer brokerage can be used for residential, commercial, and also for rentals. Using the buyer brokerage agreement will help you to turn shoppers into buyers. Successful agents use BBAs. And as I like to say, get hired or get used. Really, folks, if you are not using a BBA, this can be like volunteer work. And I also recommend using a BBA with friends and family because your friends and family are even more likely to hurt you. Of course, you can just say that your broker requires a BBA. I don't really require it. But, you can blame it on your broker. Gee, Mom, I know you love me and I trust you, but my broker requires this buyer brokerage agreement. But seriously, friends and family are more likely to hurt you in this business than anyone else. So I'd like you to go ahead and pull out the buyer brokerage agreement. We're going to be covering this a couple of different ways, actually. So like I cover every other form, we're going to be going through it, pretty much line by line, so you understand exactly how the form works and how to fill it out. But my experience in this business tells me that the reticence that agents have to use the BBA is not because of the contents of the form, it's because of the delivery, the presentation of the form. So we're going to go through the mechanics of the form first, and then we're going to circle back and we're going to talk about how I recommend delivering this form. So now that you have the BBA in front of you, it says at the top, I, the buyer. Let's pause right there to understand we want to have every possible name on this form that we can. Example, if you're working with a couple and you put only one person's name on the form, I think you're making a mistake. We want to know we want to have as many people on the form as we can, including the actual buyers and perhaps any decision makers who might be lurking behind the scenes. It says hereby employs and grants. On line 2, we would put in TR Realty. The exclusive and irrevocable right. Exclusive means it's only with us. Irrevocable means they can't take it back. Commencing on and expiring at. So that is their term. I highly recommend that we use a year. Don't be too enthusiastic thinking, we're going to go out, we're going to find a house in 10 minutes, we're going to close escrow in a week, and we only need a short period of time on the BBA. I recommend that we put in a generous time period in the BBA. There's no reason to cut it short here. And then it says to locate property and negotiate terms and conditions acceptable to buyer for purchase, exchange, option, or lease. So despite the title of this document, buyer brokerage agreement, it does work for rentals as well. Please keep that in mind. A lot of TR agents use BBAs when they work with renters. Paragraph 1 says, general nature of property. Buyer intends to acquire an interest in one or more properties, meeting the following general description. And that goes back to what I said about the time period. Because if a buyer buys a property from us, this is not over. This BBA is not over. It's not contingent upon the purchase of a property. It's for a period of time. So again, we want to be generous with that time period to protect ourselves. So in other words, if you do a BBA with a customer and the customer buys a house, the BBA is still in effect until it actually expires. So that if they were to turn around and buy a second property, they would need to do that through us as well. On line 9, we can check to the left of those words, by the way, residential land, commercial, or other. Since all of you I'm assuming you're all licensees watching my video. You're all licensed to sell residential and land and commercial. Check, check, check. Do you think buyers ever change their mind on what they want to buy? So why would you check only one of those things? You're licensed to sell all of them. Paragraph 2, buyer obligations. Buyer agrees to work exclusively with broker and not with any other broker. That language is exactly what I have in my prenup, by the way. No, I'm kidding. 2B says, buyer agrees to furnish broker with all relevant data, records, documents, and other information, including loan pre-approval letters and proof of funds. C says, buyer agrees to be available, also a quote out of my prenup. 2D says, buyer agrees to act in good faith. 2E talks about new homes and lot sales, and I want to bring your attention to the end of line 22, where it says, if buyer makes a first visit without broker, buyer agrees to compensate broker as stated in broker compensation below. So this is a warning to a buyer that if they sign a BBA with us and then they turn around and they walk into a builder's sales office, we should know that most builders will not then pay out a commission unless the broker or agent made the first visit with the customer. So this sentence is a bit of warning to the buyer not to do that. 2F says buyer agrees that to the fullest extent allowable under Nevada law, that the broker shall be deemed to be procuring cause. Not a whole lot of legal teeth in that paragraph, if you ask me. Let's move on to paragraph number 3 that talks about broker representation. Broker holds a current and valid Nevada real estate license. Broker agrees to work diligently. Broker agrees to negotiate. Those are our duties. Paragraph 4 is really important, and it's a paragraph where a lot of agents make mistakes. So let's look at this carefully. Broker's compensation shall be paid at the time of and as a condition of closing. So in other words, if there's no closing, they don't owe any commission. Unless there's intentional fraud or there's default of some kind. We're going to be getting to that. 4A says, buyer agrees to pay broker, select all that applies. So you could actually choose more than one of these 3 options. If you look at the first option carefully, you notice that there is a percentage symbol. So that means the buyer is agreeing to pay us some percentage of the gross selling price. My recommendation is to put 3 here, 3%. The second choice you'll see has a dollar sign, which would be a set amount. So if the buyer is agreeing that we are going to receive a flat dollar amount for the procurement of the property. Or choice number 3, whichever is greater of 1 and 2. On line 38, it says, buyer authorizes broker to accept compensation offered by seller or seller's broker, which compensation shall be credited against any compensation owed by buyer to broker. Let's make sure that we understand that. The BBA is a pledge of loyalty and exclusivity. And in the BBA, the buyer is promising that we will get paid. If you follow my example, let's say 3%. If we go out and we sell a property in MLS that offers 3% and the buyer's guaranteeing us 3%, the buyer owes us nothing. They guaranteed 3, we got 3, they owe us nothing. If we put in here 3% and we find a property that pays 4%, well, that's excellent. We still get the 4%. The buyer has guaranteed that we get 3. MLS co-op offered us 4. We get the 4%. Fantastic. Let's say it goes the other way. Let's say the buyer puts in the BBA 3%, but we sell a property in MLS that only pays us 2%. Now, technically, as per this BBA, the buyer would owe us the 1% differential, the 1% deficit. They guaranteed 3, MLS paid us 2, therefore there's a deficiency of 1% commission. However, at TR Realty, it is my decision to not pursue the buyer for that deficit. And let me explain to you why. We have asked our customer to sign a BBA. They did it. We asked them to work exclusively with us. They did it. We asked them to buy a home. They did that as well. I don't think it's fair to turn around and penalize the buyer because the seller of some property did not give us the 3% commission. The buyer has no control over that whatsoever. Therefore, I will not go after that buyer for that deficit. Now, before we go further, keeping this BBA in front of you, I'd like to bring your attention back to my clause library. Specifically, I'd like to bring your attention to clause 3.02, which says, broker hereby agrees that in the event the cooperating commission received by broker due to a successful purchase or lease is less than the commission stated in paragraph 4A of this agreement, broker shall not pursue buyer or lessee for the difference. There's the language that encapsulates exactly what I told you, that I will not be pursuing that deficit. So you're more than welcome to take my clause 3.02 and put that into additional terms on this BBA if your buyer is concerned that he might be pursued for the difference in commission. Now, going back to the BBA, let's pick up where we left off at paragraph 4B, which says, in addition to the compensation in 4A, buyer agrees to pay broker some dollar amount as and for the flat fee portion of broker's total compensation. That is our processing fee. And if you watched my video series Class 1, where we talk about processing fees, I mentioned to you that TR Realty collects a $2.99 processing fee. You are welcome to charge your seller whatever you wish. You're welcome to charge your buyer whatever you wish. And this BBA is where we would indicate that processing fee that we're going to charge to the buyer, okay? So fill that in as you wish, but my recommendation is $299. It goes on to say, this flat fee portion is assessed by broker to its clients and customers in exchange for real estate services provided and actually performed and is not required, etc. 4C, buyer agrees to compensate broker if the buyer or any other person acting on buyer's behalf enters into an agreement to purchase, exchange, option, or lease any property of the general nature described herein. So we don't want a situation where a buyer perhaps uses a relative's name to go out and buy property as a way to circumvent this BBA, and that language is in there as a prophylactic to protect us in that case. 4D talks about if completion of any transaction is prevented by buyer's default or with the consent of the buyer, the total compensation due under this agreement shall be immediately due and payable. 4E, buyer agrees to pay such compensation if buyer within blank calendar days after the termination of this agreement enters into an agreement to purchase, exchange, option, or lease any property shown to or negotiated on behalf of the buyer by broker during the term of this agreement, unless buyer enters into a subsequent agreement with another broker. That is a very important paragraph known as a protection period. And my recommendation there is 180 days. And what that means in English is a buyer cannot simply wait for this BBA to expire and then go out and do a deal behind our back. So for 180 days after the expiration of this agreement, it would protect us for any property that we showed during the term of the BBA. 4F, commissions payable for the purchase, exchange, option, or lease of property are not set by the association or the board, etc., etc. They are negotiable. Let's go to paragraph 5 where it says, buyer acknowledges receipt of the duties owed form. And that's why in an earlier video in class 3, I told you that duties owed must be the very first thing that we do. Must be first duties owed. And then it talks about buyer understands, depending on the circumstances, it may be necessary or appropriate for broker to act as an agent of both parties. That is both legal and in Nevada, and it is allowed at TR Realty. Paragraph 6 talks about non-confidentiality. I want to skip a little bit quickly through some of these paragraphs where there's nothing to fill in or not much to fill in. Paragraph 7 says, buyer acknowledges and agrees that properties presented to them may have been marketed through a virtual tour on the internet, permitting potential buyers to view properties online, that the properties may be subject to comments or opinions of value, etc. Paragraph 8 is equal housing opportunity. I want to be very clear to all my associates watching this video. I am adamant to the exponential degree about equal opportunity and fair housing at TR Realty. We strictly adhere to all fair housing acts, all fair housing amendments, and I will not tolerate one iota of discrimination at any time and for any reason. Paragraph 9 alerts the buyer that there might be other buyers interested in the same property. Paragraph 10 is a mediation provision. I've always been a big fan of mediation. It is faster, cheaper, and easier than going to court. So even though the association has informed us they will be getting out of the mediation business, and there will be a new version of this BBA coming from the association at some point soon, so we hear. Right now, we can still use the paragraph, just understanding that the association will not be doing the mediation. We would have to go to an independent mediator. And on line 34, you see that it calls for initials of the buyer and initials of the broker. Keep in mind, anytime you see a paragraph or clause in a legally binding document that has its own separate requirement for initials, the entire provision would only be binding if both parties initialed it. So in other words, in this case, let's just say as an example, if the buyer initials paragraph 10 for mediation and the broker does not, then the mediation provision would not apply. Now, of course, I'm a proponent of mediation. I will always initial off on the mediation, and I recommend it highly. I recommend it to the buyer as well. 11 talks about attorney's fees. The prevailing party is going to get attorney's fees. Paragraph 12, I'm sorry, I have to laugh. It's kind of interesting. It's a new paragraph. It's a damages cap. What the association is trying to do in paragraph 12 is to say that our liability as real estate professionals is limited to the amount of commission that we collect. I don't think that is legally enforceable, but I'm not an attorney. That's just my opinion. Paragraph 3, this is a Nevada contract, and Nevada is where it would be argued if any litigation ensues. Paragraph 14 talks about the fact that the buyer has legal capacity to sign this agreement. Paragraph 15, I want to bring your attention to line 58 in that paragraph that says may be executed in 2 or more counterparts. So actually in the state of Nevada, it is legal for one party to sign one copy, the second party to sign a second copy, as long as the copies are absolutely identical. We have a legally binding contract. The signatures need not appear on the same piece of paper to have a legally binding contract in Nevada. So that's what we're covering in paragraph 15. 16, partial invalidity, meaning that if some court decided that one particular provision of this agreement were not enforceable, the rest of the agreement would still be enforceable. It would not negate the entire agreement. 17 is very important. It is also a protection for us. Notice the bold print and the underline, right? Buyer acknowledges and warrants by signature below that he is not already in an exclusive buyer representation agreement with any other broker into the state of Nevada. Entering into multiple agreements could subject the buyer to multiple fee obligations. If you remember in Class 1, in the professional representation segment, I talked about the fact that we are supposed to ask our buyers, have you entered into a contract with another broker? How that is now the standard question that we should be asking so that we don't interfere with another realtor and violate the code of ethics. So here, paragraph 17, we're actually making the buyer attest in writing to the fact that he has not entered into a binding contract with another broker. Now, maybe he did, maybe he's not reading, maybe he's lying, whatever, but the point is to take the onus off of us to shift that liability and risk to that buyer. Paragraph 18 talks about accepting this form. 19 is about FIRPTA. If you're not familiar with FIRPTA, it stands for Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act. The Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act is designed to ensure that someone doesn't sell real estate in the United States and then take all their proceeds and leave the country without paying their share of taxes. And actually, in a real estate transaction, and this is under IRS code, by the way, in a real estate transaction, the buyer is responsible for ensuring that the seller complies with FIRPTA. Now, in everyday real estate, don't worry about this because this is something that the title company is going to take care of for you. And paragraph 20 talks about default. If completion of any transaction is prevented by buyer's default or with the consent of buyer, the total compensation due under this agreement shall be immediately due and payable. Buyer agrees to pay such compensation if buyer within blank calendar days after the termination of this agreement enters into an agreement to purchase any property shown to or negotiated on behalf. So this works very similar to the earlier protection period. And I'm going to recommend again here that we fill this in with 180 days. I've been asked many times in this BBA, what is the difference between the protection period in paragraph 4 and the protection period in paragraph 20? I know they look similar and they use similar language. So I want to make sure that we are understanding that in case your buyer asks you. So in paragraph 4, the protection period is for the purpose of a buyer trying to wait out the expiration of this BBA to go to another broker to make a deal. The protection period in paragraph 20 is if we have the buyer in a deal, if we have them in escrow, and they intentionally try to default on the transaction so they can get out of it, get out of the BBA, and then turn around and go to another broker. So slightly different circumstances where we could be cheated out of our commission. Both of them protection periods, both of them important, both of them recommended 180 days. I want to bring your attention to paragraph 21. Paragraph 21 is by far the most dangerous paragraph of this entire BBA. Now, you're looking at it and you're seeing that it's blank. And you're wondering why Brad is saying that this paragraph is dangerous. The reason it's dangerous is because agents like to write language. Folks, the only thing that should be written in paragraph 21 is clause 3.02 that we covered a few minutes ago. That's it. If you submit a BBA for my signature and there's something else in paragraph 21 other than clause 3.02, it will probably be rejected by me, okay? Agents feel the need, I don't know, they want to act like the big man on campus, they want to act like a big shot, they want to show off how smart they think they are, and they want to start adding language into that paragraph. It's ridiculous. Do not do it. It is incredibly dangerous. And below paragraph 21, You'll see starting on line 41 the place for signatures and contact information. I want to remind you the correct order of signatures is the customer signs first. And by the way, they need to fill out all of the information. We need the address on the phone and the email and the fax. When all of that has been done, then it is time for you, the designated licensee, to sign second. When the customer and you have both signed, then it is time to submit this BBA to our compliance department for my signature. And I want to remind you how critical it is that when I sign it, you get a copy back to the buyer. Remember, in Class 1, we talked about the definition of an effective contract. It is one that is signed by the parties and delivered to the parties. If the buyer does not receive a fully effectuated copy of this agreement, there is no agreement, and therefore it is not legally binding upon that buyer. Always get a copy of the fully effectuated BBA back to the buyer. So there are the mechanics of the BBA. It's not that hard, right? You can go back anytime you get a BBA, you can play this video again, and you can understand exactly how I'm recommending you fill it in. A lot of agents don't use the BBA. Folks, in fact, when I was selling real estate, before I became a broker, nobody taught me how to do a BBA. Nobody even talked about the BBA in my office. This is something that I had to teach myself. But I can tell you, when I started using the BBA, it really changed my career. And it also changed my life. The reason I say it changed my life is because real estate agents think they have so many buyers they're working with. But really, folks, when it comes down to it, are you working with buyers or are you working with shoppers? So when I started using the BBA, it showed my prospective buyers how serious I was. It got them to make a decision to decide whether they're serious or not serious. And I want to tell you my success rate with asking my buyers to sign the BBA was around 50%. That's okay. I lost a lot of people. I didn't lose buyers, folks. I lost shoppers. I lost people that would have spent my time, spent my gas, wasted all of my resources driving them around, spending time answering questions when they weren't serious at all. So when I say I got my life back, instead of wasting my entire day and night and weekend and holiday with a shopper, I was able to focus on fewer people, but serious people. And now I was able to enjoy some time off. And that's what I mean by it improved my life. I mentioned that a lot of agents are reticent to use the BBA. And I also mentioned it's because of the presentation, in my opinion. They're just not confident. They don't know how to present this. They're scared they're going to lose the customer. They're timid, they're weak, they're shy, however you want to phrase it. So I would like to get into the way I presented this BBA. So when I was selling real estate and I decided that I was going to use a BBA, I decided to bring my customers to the office, okay? Because I don't think that business is done at a coffee shop. I don't think it's done on the trunk of your car or out in the street somewhere. I believe that business is done at a business location. So I would make sure that I had a conference room reserved, and I would always make an appointment, okay? No one respects you more than you. So by making an appointment, you know the day, you know the time, and you can be prepared for your meeting with your customer. And in preparation for the meeting, there's a few things I would do. One is to talk to my customer in advance, find out what they wanted to buy, what their price point was. I would ask them all of the pertinent questions that we talked about in an earlier video here in Class 3. Also, I would require them to send me either a proof of funds if they were paying cash or a pre-approval letter from a lender. That would happen before I met my customer in person. Also, I would prepare all of the documents that I wanted them to sign. And if you're wondering what documents I'm referring to, go back to Class 3, where I talk about buyer paperwork before offer. So the duties owed, the residential disclosure guide, the other disclosures, the REO notice, all of those forms that we talk about in that segment. I would have all of those filled out as much as I could, and I would also have anywhere that required their signature or initials, I would highlight it with some colored highlighter so I could easily not miss it that way. And I would also have the BBA filled out to the best that I could in advance with the signature and initial sections highlighted for convenience. I would have all of those documents ready, and I would have them at the head of the conference room table, which is where I sit, by the way, and all of those would be turned upside down. While I'm talking with someone, I don't want them trying to look and trying to read what it says on the paper. So that's why they're upside down. Now, why am I at the head of the table? I'm at the head of the table because the dog wags the tail. The tail doesn't wag the dog. I am the professional. I'm going to sit in the power seat, which is the head of the table. And of course, I'm also going to look the part, just as I look right now in this video. I look professional. I think that's how real estate agents should look. I don't think anyone can take you seriously walking around in, a tank top and flip-flops. That's not how business should be conducted. After all, we are asking our customer to engage us in a transaction that could potentially pay us thousands of dollars. In my opinion, meeting with a customer is a job interview, and we should look the part, we should look professional. So my customers would come to the office at a prescribed day and time that we agreed upon. I would bring them into the conference room where my papers were set out at my seat at the head of the table, upside down, with a couple of pens on the table, and my presentation to them would go something like this. John and Mary, thank you so much for coming in and meeting with me today. I'm very excited to get started on our new endeavor. Now, we have talked by phone, and I understand that you're looking for a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom home with a pool and a 2-car garage, something that's 10 years old or newer in a particular part of town. Do I have that right, John and Mary? And do I understand that your budget is about $450,000? The good news is I have done a preliminary search in MLS, and I believe there are several properties that might satisfy your criteria. So the purpose of us getting together today is so that I could tell you a little bit about myself and the services that I provide, and give you the opportunity to hire me as your agent if that is a decision that you would like to make. And then I would go on to tell John and Mary about my experience in real estate, my credentials, my advanced designations, how long I've been in the business, and those kinds of things. And then I would shift my presentation to them, something like this. Now, John and Mary, that you know a little bit about me and how eager I am to work with you and how honored I would be to represent you in your purchase, I'd like to talk a little bit about the services that I can provide to you. The very first thing is I will be sending you by email a list of properties, and each of those properties will have photos and descriptive information. I'd like the two of you to take some time and look at the information I send you very carefully. Pour yourself a cup of coffee, sit down, debate between yourselves, discuss it, and I'd like you to narrow it down to your 4 favorite properties that I send you. Alert me which 4 those are. And then I'm going to schedule a day and time at your convenience, of course, when we can go out and we can see those 4 properties. Now, when we go out, we're going to have a 2-hour block of time. And you can spend that time any way you wish. If you want to spend an hour on the first house and 5 minutes on the second house, or if you wish to divide it equally, that's completely your choice. but we're going to take 2 hours to go out and see those 4 properties. I'm going to be with you, John and Mary, every step of the way. I'm going to have pertinent information at my fingertips in the event of your questions. If you'd like to know the list price, if you'd like to know the year built, if you'd like to know the square footage, if you'd like to know if there's association involved, and if so, how much is that association? If you'd like to know things like if pets are acceptable, or how long the property's been on the market, I'm going to be there to answer any of those questions you might have. When you're done seeing each property, we're going to move on to the next property. At the end of the 2-hour time block, I'm going to ask you a question. Is there one of those properties that you would be interested in writing an offer? If the answer is yes, then that's what we're going to do. If the answer is no, we're going to go back and we're going to repeat the first steps again. I'm going to go back to MLS, perhaps adjust my criteria a bit, send you a new list of properties, ask you to narrow that down to 4, and we will go ahead and schedule another block of time for those viewings. But John and Mary, if you answer yes, that you would like to write an offer on one of those properties, now my job really begins. Because it is up to me to write an offer that satisfies you, the price that you want to offer, the close of escrow date that you would like, the other terms and conditions, the way the financing breaks down, things about inspections and warranties. And John and Mary, I'm going to make sure that you have an ample due diligence period during which you can do inspections, you can investigate that property any way that you feel you would like to do so. When that offer is to your satisfaction, I'm going to ask for your approval by signing it, and then I'm going to submit that to the listing agent. Now, I'm not just going to send an email and sit back and wait, John and Mary. I'm going to advocate for you. I'm going to represent you to the best of my ability to that listing agent in an effort to convince the seller to accept the offer. Now, typically, the seller does not accept the first offer. Typically, there is a counteroffer process. I'm going to keep you fully engaged and in the loop throughout that process. And John and Mary, if we are able to come to a successful meeting of the minds, I will make sure that contract is effectuated perfectly, again, to your satisfaction. I'll make sure that you get copies of all of that paperwork. And now we will enter into escrow. And what that means is we have a buyer on the hook. Now it's time to complete so many more steps in the process, John and Mary, including the buyer's inspections, including the application for mortgage if the buyer is getting a mortgage, things like ordering the resale package, things like ordering the appraisal if the buyer is getting a mortgage or if he wants one. And all throughout those steps, John and Mary, I'm going to be with you to coach you, to advise you, to assist you, to answer your questions, and to put your minds at ease every step of the way. John and Mary, just before the closing time, the buyer is entitled to one more viewing of the property. We refer to that as a walkthrough. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there to protect you and to make sure that walkthrough goes exactly as we want it to go. So as you can see throughout the entire process, I'll be working with title and escrow. I'll be working with the mortgage lender. I'll be working with the inspector. I'll be working with the appraiser. I'll be coordinating the walkthrough. I will be completely involved every step of the way. And John and Mary, when that day and time comes that you are about to take possession of that property, guess what? I'm going to be right there with you, by your side, as you sign those final closing documents and you take possession. And I will have the honor and the privilege of putting those keys directly into your hands. What an amazing feeling that's going to be for you and for me as well. So John and Mary, that is a little bit about the services that I offer And now I'd like to ask you a question. Am I the agent for you? Do you trust me to find your dream home? Now, folks, at that point, John and Mary can go several ways with this, right? They could say to me, no, you know what? We don't like you. We don't believe in you. We don't want to hire you. In which case, not a problem. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to shake their hands. I'm going to thank them for their time, and I'm going to escort them out. And remember that I have eliminated this person as a customer without spending one drop of gas, without wasting 1 minute showing properties. Another way they can go is they can say, yes, you are the agent for us. We would like to hire you, Brad. We would love to work with you. Well, it just so happens I have all of my documents prepared. John and Mary, I have everything here that it takes to hire me today. There's a couple of pens for your convenience. I've highlighted all of the spots where I need you to sign and or initial. You know what I used to say to them? John and Mary, I had a big cup of coffee. I'm going to excuse myself and use the restroom. I'll be back in just a few minutes. Now, folks, why am I doing that? Because I never, ever want someone to feel pressured, coerced, bullied into signing paperwork. I want to give them ample opportunity to read, talk, and, maybe leave if they're not comfortable, okay? So in a court of law, if this ever got to a court of law, the customer said, I felt pressured. Brad forced us to sign this paperwork. You know what? I don't think so. I even left the room for a period of time. So when I come back, either the paperwork is signed or it's not. Now, if the paperwork is signed, what I'm going to do is go through it page by page. This is why I have highlights, right? It's going to bring my attention to every place they need to sign or initial. I'm going to make sure it's all done. John and Mary, I am so happy to be working with the two of you, and I'm so looking forward to this process. Thank you so much for coming in to see me today. Within a couple of hours, I'll make sure you have copies of all of this in your email. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to have properties in your inbox. Let's get this process started. Thank you so much. Or I come back from my restroom break, and the paperwork is not signed. John and Mary, did you have a question? Well, yes. We're not quite sure what it says over here in paragraph 7. Well, John and Mary, let me explain to you my interpretation of paragraph 7. Of course, you're free to consult with counsel at any time. You're free to take the paperwork with you and perhaps get back to me. But here's how I understand paragraph 7. And they can, again, continue and sign everything or not. If they choose not to sign, that is absolutely fine. If they choose to sign, I'm not showing any properties today. Did you hear me? Folks, did you also hear me say a 2-hour window of time? You know why I said that? Most real estate agents will set a day and a time to meet a customer. They'll never set a time to finish. And how can you have 2 appointments in one day if you don't know when you're going to finish the first appointment? So other professionals will block an hour or 2 hours or 30 minutes or what have you. Real estate agents will meet their customer at 10 o'clock and they'll go crazy until the customer says, okay, I'm done for the day. And then the agent is typically done for the day too because they haven't budgeted their time very wisely. So from the beginning, I let my customers know it would be a 2-hour block of time. And then, like I said, folks, at that point, I'm going to escort them out. I'm going to send copies of the paperwork to their email. See? I'm not making photocopies and handing to them because I couldn't prove delivery. I'm sending them by email, so if push ever came to shove, I can prove delivery of those fully effectuated documents. And we're going to go out and look at property another day, another time. We're not going to do it. And folks, now I've got that VBA signed. I can sleep like a baby. I don't have to worry. They're going to walk into a for sale by owner. They're going to walk into an open house. They're going to go visit a builder. I am completely protected. And that is how I do a BBA, and that is how I changed my career and my life. I would like to thank you for watching this video. I hope it was informative for you. If you are licensed with another brokerage in Southern Nevada and would like to talk with me, please text me or visit our website. See you next time.